They say in Cedar Hill, if you hear a knock after midnight, don't answer. Locals speak of a girl, small, barefoot, her eyes black as coal. She wanders after storms, asking to come inside. Those who do are never seen again. Tonight, we reopen the door to her legend, the black-eyed girl of Cedar Hill. A true horror encounter you'll never forget. The road to Cedar Hill is gone now, swallowed by time and fear. But sometimes when thunder rolls across the valley, people still hear her knocking. If it happens to you, remember her eyes, because once you've seen the darkness inside them, it's already seen you. This has been The Silent Screams.
The storm had been relentless all night, thrashing against the cabin like it wanted in. By midnight, the rain stopped, leaving only the slow, steady drip from the roof and the hollow echo of wind across the valley. I sat by the fireplace, the flames fading to dull embers, when it came. A knock. Soft, deliberate, spaced perfectly apart. 3 knocks. At first, I thought it was the wind, or maybe a loose branch striking the porch. But then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. Each one heavier than before. My pulse quickened. No one should have been out there. Cedar Hill was miles from the main road, a town forgotten by GPS and ignored by God. The locals had warned me about the hills after dark. If you see her, they'd said, don't stop. Don't look at her eyes. I laughed it off then, but in that moment, with the sound echoing through the wood, the words crawled back to me like a curse. I moved slowly to the window. The porch light flickered with the rhythm of the wind. Beyond it, the world was soaked in darkness. Then lightning flashed, bright, sharp, merciless, and for a single heartbeat I saw her. A girl standing at the edge of the porch, drenched, barefoot, her head tilted slightly to the side. Her hair clung to her pale face, and when the light vanished, she was gone. I waited, breath frozen, hand hovering near the doorknob. The silence that followed was heavier than sound. Then, knock, knock, knock. The sound came again, closer this time, from just inches beyond the door. And beneath it, I heard something else, a whisper. It said my name. I stood frozen at the door, every instinct screaming to ignore it, to pretend I hadn't heard it. But curiosity, always the cruelest of instincts, won. I reached for the curtain and pulled it back just enough to see. The porch light flickered once more, and there she was, a girl no older than 10, standing barefoot in the rain that no longer fell, her thin dress clinging to her small frame like wet paper. Her hair, dark and stringy, dripped down over her face, and her skin gleamed pale under the weak light. "Please," she said softly. Her voice didn't match her body. It was too calm, too even, like someone repeating lines from a memory. "I'm lost. Can I come in?" Her head tilted to one side as she spoke, and that's when I saw them. Her eyes, or rather, the absence of them. They were black. Not brown, not dark, but black. Endless, glossy voids that reflected no light, no color, no life. Looking into them felt like falling backwards into nothingness. My throat tightened. Every part of me screamed to shut the curtain and run, but my hand stayed on the fabric, trembling. She didn't move closer, didn't blink, didn't even breathe. She just stood there, raindrops sliding down her face in perfect silence. "I'm lost," she repeated, her tone identical, as if she hadn't just spoken the same words. "Please, let me in." Then came the sound of footsteps behind her, soft, deliberate, too heavy to be hers, but no one was there. The porch light buzzed violently, and her head snapped upward, eyes locking on mine. The bulb burst. Darkness swallowed everything, and yet through the pitch-black window I could still see her eyes, glowing faintly, like two holes cut into the night.
I stumbled back from the window, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The cabin had gone completely dark. Only the dying glow from the fireplace painted faint shapes across the walls. I fumbled for my phone, but the screen stayed black, dead, no signal. The silence pressed down on me until even my breathing sounded too loud. Then, from across the room, a faint crackle broke through the air. The old radio on the shelf, one I hadn't even plugged in, flickered to life. Static hissed, sharp and erratic, filling the room like whispering voices tangled together. I froze. Beneath the static, I heard something, a soft hum, then a voice, fragile but unmistakable. "Let her in," it said. The tone was almost gentle, coaxing, like a mother soothing a child. I took a step closer, pulse hammering. Then another voice joined it, lower, rougher. "If you open the door," it warned, "you'll never close it again." The static swelled, drowning out both voices. The radio's dial spun on its own, landing on random frequencies, each one carrying faint fragments. Children laughing, someone crying, the sound of distant thunder. I reached to turn it off, but before I touched it, the whisper returned, louder this time, right beside my ear. "She's cold." I spun around, nothing but the flicker of firelight. The knocking started again, slow, steady, deliberate. 3 knocks. The window rattled, and through the glass I saw her standing there once more, rain dripping from her hair, though the storm had passed hours ago. Her mouth moved silently. The radio screamed, a piercing shriek that made me drop to my knees. The glass shattered inward. And in that moment, I finally realized the knocking was no longer coming from the door. It was coming from inside the house. By morning, the storm had gone, but the silence it left behind was heavier than thunder. The world outside the cabin looked washed clean, yet something about the air felt wrong, thick, still, watching. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The broken glass glittered on the floor like ice, and the radio sat quiet again, as if it had never made a sound. I told myself I needed answers. I needed reason. So I drove into town. Cedar Hill looked exactly as it had the day before. Quiet streets, peeling paint, tired faces. At the general store, the same clerk from yesterday glanced up when I entered, but this time his smile faltered. "Rough night?" he asked, but when he saw my scratches on my arm, his expression hardened. "You heard her, didn't you?" I froze. "Who?" He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "The girl." The name alone seemed to drain color from the room. He told me the story in a whisper, words trembling like confession. 50 years ago, a fire consumed the Cedar Hill orphanage, the one that used to stand on the hill beyond the river. They found no survivors, except one, a girl, maybe 10 years old, standing barefoot in the ash. Her eyes were black as soot, her skin cold to the touch. When they tried to take her away, she vanished. Every few years, someone new sees her. Always at night, always in the rain. She knocks, asks to come inside, and if you say yes... He didn't finish, just stared at the floor, knuckles white against the counter. I forced a laugh. "It's just a story." He met my eyes, his voice low, hollow. "Then why do you smell like smoke?"
That night, the wind rose again, dragging the smell of rain through the cracks in the cabin walls. The storm hadn't started yet, but the world held its breath like it knew what was coming. I sat with every light on, pretending the glow could keep her away. The clock read 11:47 when the radio on the counter clicked by itself, dial turning until static filled the room. Beneath the hiss came a single word, stretched and broken. Ready. The bulb above me flickered once, then twice, and the knocking began. 3 taps, slow, gentle, familiar. My throat tightened. I backed toward the bedroom, but the sound followed, this time from the window. The curtain swayed, though no breeze touched it. Then a pale face pressed against the glass. Water slid down her cheeks like tears, though the rain had not yet fallen. Her eyes, black and bottomless, found mine, and her lips moved soundlessly. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read them clearly. You promised. I stumbled backward, hitting the dresser. The radio screamed a high-pitched tone, the same one I'd heard the night before the orphanage burned in the clerk's story. The girl's face remained still, frozen between innocence and fury. Then her hand lifted, pressing against the window pane. The glass fogged beneath her palm, forming the shape of a circle. Lightning split the sky, flooding the cabin with white light. For a heartbeat, she vanished. When the darkness returned, she was inside, standing in the middle of the room, dripping onto the wooden floor, her dress whispering as she took a step forward. Her mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. "Now," she said softly, "it's your turn to let me in."
When I woke, the storm had passed. Pale morning light crept through the cracked blinds, weak and uncertain, like it didn't want to see what was left. The cabin felt wrong, too quiet, too still, as though someone had hit pause on the world. I rose slowly, every muscle stiff. The floorboards creaked under my bare feet, answering the silence with a language only old wood knows. That's when I saw them. Muddy footprints. Small ones. They started at the front door, wound through the living room, and stopped at the side of my bed. I stared at the prints, heart drumming against my ribs. The mud was still damp. My phone sat on the nightstand where I'd left it, dead last night, now glowing faintly. I reached for it, half expecting static or nothing at all. The screen lit up instantly. One notification. New photo. I didn't remember taking any. My hands trembled as I opened the gallery. The newest image loaded slowly, pixels bleeding into shape. It was a picture of me, sleeping, taken from the foot of the bed. My chest tightened as I studied it. My arm hung loosely off the mattress, the sheets twisted around me. But there was something else in the shadows behind me. A faint silhouette, blurred but visible. A small figure. Her. The black-eyed girl stood at the edge of the frame, her face tilted downward, her hand reaching toward me. The photo ended just before she touched my shoulder. I dropped the phone. It hit the floor, and the screen cracked down the middle, slicing her face cleanly in two. From the shattered speaker came a single faint whisper, a voice I recognized. "You shouldn't have looked."
By nightfall, the cabin felt smaller, the walls leaning inward, as if the house itself were holding its breath. I couldn't stand the silence, so I filled the sink and washed my hands just to hear water move. The mirror above the basin quivered, its frame vibrating against the wall. At first it was a hum, faint and rhythmic, like a heartbeat buried in glass. Then it deepened, an echo that crawled through the pipes and into my bones. My reflection looked wrong. The light above flickered, stretching my face into something hollow. I leaned closer, whispering to my own trembling image, "You're just tired." The glass rippled, the air behind my reflection darkened, and another face began to take shape over mine. She stood there, pale, drenched, eyes black and endless. The same child, the same blank stare. Her lips parted, and a thin fog escaped from the mirror, coating the sink in cold dew. "You saw me," she whispered. The voice didn't come from her mouth, but from everywhere. The air, the water, my chest. "That means you remember." Her hand lifted slowly. The surface of the mirror softened, turning liquid. Fingertips broke through, dripping with black water. I tried to step back, but the floor beneath me creaked, refusing to let me move. She touched the back of my neck, light, almost tender, and the room plunged into darkness. When the lights returned, the mirror was shattered, its pieces scattered like teeth across the floor. My reflection stared back from a dozen fragments, each one smiling when I wasn't. And somewhere beneath that fractured chorus of faces, her voice lingered, faint but clear. "Now we're the same."
I woke to sunlight crawling across the floor, but it brought no warmth. Every shadow in the room seemed too still, too watchful. My neck ached where she had touched me, and when I dragged myself to the mirror, what was left of it, I saw faint bruises blooming across my skin. 5 marks, thin, perfect lines shaped like fingers. I told myself it was a dream, but the sting under my skin said otherwise. The air smelled of smoke again, not the gentle scent of the fireplace, but something sharp and chemical, like burned plastic. I checked the stove, the outlets, nothing. Then I noticed the mirrors, every single one. The hallway, the dresser, the bathroom, they were all shattered overnight, their glass curling outward, not inward, as if something had forced its way through. I grabbed my keys and ran outside, desperate to feel real air. The forest waited in silence, thick fog coiling between the trees. I turned toward the car and froze. The entire back windshield was covered in tiny handprints, not dusty smudges, but perfect prints made from soot, hundreds of them, overlapping until they formed a shape, a circle. My chest tightened. I climbed into the car anyway, shaking as I jammed the key into the ignition. The engine didn't even try to start. Instead, the dashboard lights flickered weakly, and the radio came alive. Static first, then a child's giggle, high, breathless, far too close. When I looked down at my hand gripping the steering wheel, I saw it. Burned into the skin, dark as ink, was a small black circle, the same one drawn in ash across the glass. It pulsed faintly, almost alive. I pressed my hand against the seat to hide it, but the mark burned hotter, deeper, whispering from beneath my flesh. "You're hers now."
By afternoon, I couldn't take the silence anymore. The forest had grown restless. The wind no longer moved the trees, yet the branches swayed like something invisible brushed against them. I packed my things, or tried to. Every drawer I opened held nothing but ash. My clothes, my phone charger, even the food I'd bought, gone. As if time had burned the cabin from the inside out. I left everything and started walking towards Cedar Hill. The mark on my hand pulsed with each heartbeat, a steady rhythm that matched the sound of footsteps behind me. Every time I turned, the road was empty. It took hours to reach the town, though it should have been a 30-minute walk. When I finally arrived, something was wrong. The streets were older, the colors faded. The gas station looked half collapsed, its windows dusted in decades of grime. The sign outside read, "Closed since 1973. My chest tightened as I stepped inside the general store. The air was thick with dust, and sunlight poured through broken slats in long, golden stripes. Behind the counter sat a newspaper, its pages yellow and brittle. The headline froze my blood. "Traveler found dead in cabin after encounter with black-eyed girl." The date was yesterday. My hands shook as I read the rest. My name printed clearly in black ink. "Lost time," a voice said behind me. I turned. The clerk stood there, unchanged, his expression heavy with pity. "He keeps the ones who see her." I tried to speak, but my throat locked. He pointed to my reflection in the window. "You're not here anymore." I looked, and my reflection smiled. It raised its hand, and the mark on its skin was still burning. I don't remember leaving Cedar Hill. One moment I was standing in that ruined store. The next, I was behind the wheel, the car humming beneath me as if it had never stalled. The sky outside was gray and endless, the kind of color that eats distance. I kept driving, unsure of where the road was leading, just desperate to escape. The mark on my hand had darkened, veins branching from it like cracks in old glass. Every few miles, the radio whispered my name, soft and affectionate, like a parent calling a child home. By dusk, I reached a small roadside motel. The sign flickered weakly, vacancy. The woman at the desk didn't speak much, didn't even look up when I signed the register. The pen trembled in my fingers as I wrote my name, though the letters came out wrong, uneven. In the mirror behind the counter, I caught a glimpse of myself. My eyes looked darker than they should. The room smelled of damp carpet and old smoke. I set my bag down and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the rain tapping against the window. Except it wasn't raining. The sound came from the door. 3 knocks. Slow, patient, familiar. I froze. My throat tightened, every muscle screaming not to move. But something inside me shifted. An ache, a pull, like gravity itself had turned inward. I rose, steps slow, hand reaching for the handle. "Please," a voice whispered from the other side. My voice. I stood there trembling, palm against the door,
feeling warmth seep through the wood. Then the light flickered, and the reflection in the window moved without me. It smiled, and from behind the door came the sound of breathing, steady, soft, waiting. The last thing I heard before the light died completely was a whisper that crawled straight through the dark. "You promised to let me in."